Hi everybody, welcome. This is Rob Provencher here for Shoot Smarter. I'd like to do a quick tutorial video for you explaining how I photograph a lot of cover shots for a lot of our local lifestyle magazines. As you can see by the screen, I've got their Facebook fan page or their page up, and most of the shots you can see on the screen are photographed by myself in our studio. And we photograph for multiple magazines, all the same publisher. There's a parent magazine, there's the regular Sudbury Living magazine, there's a new sports magazine, they have a wedding magazine as well. So it's an awesome way to supplement our income every year with our weddings and families and babies taking up a large part of our studio deal flow. However, it's nice to be able to do some editorial commercial type work, and I'm going to explain to you how I approach and how I actually pose and light some shots. Specifically, I'm going to get into a couple of more recent shoots. As you can see on the screen, this is a local boxer who had competed at the national level. Now, she came into the studio and we did a complete session, and this was the actual image that they used on the front cover. And this is for the local lifestyle magazine. This here is for the brand. This is the first issue, and they use this. You know, they put a masthead on there, and they put all the different copy on the overlaid on top of the image. And this is for the first edition of the brand new sports magazine, which comes every 2 months. The magazine that this went on to comes out quarterly, so every 3 months. So it's very exciting to have the opportunity to photograph for all these different publications. And as I mentioned earlier, I also photograph for they have a parent magazine, which entails a lot of family photography, and there's also a wedding magazine. All right, so I'm going to show you some images from the most recent publication for the sports magazine. This is the second issue. Remember I mentioned the curlers. That was for the first edition, or the first issue. This is the second issue ever. And what they're doing is they're highlighting the whole theme for this magazine is running. And they wanted to highlight this particular program in a local primary not a high school, sorry, a second primary school. And there's a running club that this lady here started with kids. And it's actually an awesome thing. It's catching on all over North America insofar as running and the benefits for children. Keep them healthy, keep them better students. Now, this image here, there was a Nikon SB800, half power, in behind the teacher on a stand, and it's pointing back at them. And I have a shoot-through umbrella off to my left on it with an alien bee being fired by a pocket wizard on camera. Now, the camera's a D800, and it's with a 14 to 24 lens, so it's very wide. That's what's creating that very wide effect. And obviously that backlight is creating that streaking. I wanted to create something that just was a little bit grand and sort of epic looking, and a little bit more like a bit of a rock star sort of look. There's another angle. I'm up a little bit higher, not as effective, but it still works. And then I had a bunch of shots of them running. Now this one here, I cranked up the ISO to about 1,000, and I used the 70 to 200 Nikon lens, and I shot it at 2.8, my favorite aperture. Always shoot it at 2.8 with that lens for the most part. And I believe the exposure was around 200 of a second. So I kind of had them lined up, and I did a whole series of images. This one here wasn't that good because this girl here is hidden, but I had them run over and over and over again to try and get it spaced out properly. And it worked out pretty good. Now you can see the light right here, and that is caused from the alien bee. And all I did was I took the shoot-through umbrella off, and I turned the light and bounced it up onto this wall here, somewhere in the middle of the gym, because these kids here are running against this wall, which is way back there by that basketball net, which is right here. So all I'm doing is I'm flooding the entire area with light, very, very soft light. Now you can see a little kicker over here, and that's that same SB800. I turned it down much, much lower to about a 1/64th of a second, and it's on optical slave. and it's just firing a little bit of kicker. Not really that essential, but I had it there. I thought I might as well use it. So, but the idea behind this one is they're going to use. Can you picture this one as an inset shot in the magazine with copy and the editorial? Perhaps the idea was to run it full panorama, 2-page spread. That was the idea. They may crop it down even tighter panorama to get rid of all this stuff on the top and bottom. The issue is not out yet, so I'm not sure exactly how they're going to use it. So I did the same thing as them outside, wearing their outfits. And I threw them up on the stairs, and you can see the light is glaring out in the background. That's the same light source. Again, it's an Alien Bee with a shoot-through, a white shoot-through. It's a white translucent umbrella, and it's just aimed down. It's on the stand over here, and it's aimed down at all the kids here. Now, it's very hard to get a bunch of kids to not do this kind of thing. In spite of that, they're still going to use this image here for an inset shot. They're getting tired. We've been shooting for about an hour. And they're just acting up. They're acting silly. Very, very hard to get kids to just sort of focus for any amount of time. So I put the 14 mil on my camera, and I put the SB800 on it with a Gary Fong diffuser, one of those light dome diffusers. I dropped to the ground. I said, "Kids, come and huddle around me," and I did a series of shots like this. And again, they're going to use this in the magazine as well. This is a similar shot to what I do when I photograph weddings. I do this with the bridal party, and it's an absolute favorite. By the way, when you photograph something like this, it's always best to shoot it at manual. The flash can be on automatic, but the actual camera on manual, because I don't want the camera to set the shutter speed. I like to overexpose that background here to give it some snap. All right, so here's what happened. This whole series here was the initial series for the magazine, the sports magazine, second issue. She said, "Nope, not going to work for a cover shot. Let's go do some more." They just something about a bunch of scruffy little kids on the cover shot didn't work for them. So they decided there's a running club in their local university. They have an indoor track. They found a couple of key players there. These guys are older dudes. They're still very active, and they're in this Masters running club. So I went to the university, met them there, and we did a whole series of shots. Now you can see there's a big giant window light coming in there, and that's creating a really nice light along here. It's sort of backlighting them a bit and kicker lighting them. And the main light that I used on them is a small octodome from Alien Bee, and that's an Alien Bee light fired with the Pocket Wizard. It's very white and it's very snowy outside. We had a late spring, early spring, late winter snowfall. By the way, there's that shoot-through umbrella. I brought it with me. I always bring both those lights on most shoots. And for this particular one, I use the octodome. It's only about 30 inches or so. It's a nice light source, and it does the job. Back there is the SB800 on optical slave. Okay, you can see it again there. Different angle. There's that light. And shooting from the side by the window, got a whole series of pictures of the dudes running. Very simple, very straightforward. I had them run over and over again. I dropped nice and low. Again, this is the 14 mil lens, nice and wide. I wanted something very majestic. And I'm nice and low on the ground, shooting at about 5.6. Adjusting the aperture to get that light in through the window. Not the aperture, I'm sorry, the shutter speed. And I had them run over and over and over again. I must have ended up with about 50 different shots. I wore these guys right out. All right, so one more of the individuals. I'll explain this one. Creative designer said we need a couple individuals, so I had them on the side of the track. I wanted that nice, long, this sort of look here, and we did a couple of them together. So you can see here, this is shooting down the track. I wanted that receding background. I took this light and I moved it out. It did not look good here because it kind of shone through and it looked like their crotches were on fire. Not good. But I did use the small octodome, and that small little kicker light, I moved it off to the side, and you can see it right along this dude's head and right along this dude's head. There's just a nice little kicker running along the body. And this is with the 70-200 at about 2.8 at 200 mil, shooting all the way back. So what I did was I grabbed a bunch of natural light shots with that big window. Nothing else here, just natural light at 2.8 with the 200 mil lens, and just some extra shots for them to use as inset shots and bio shots. So anyways, that's pretty much how I approach a lot of these images for these cover shots for magazines. I try and get as much information, as much research or editorial beforehand. If they give me ideas, they often don't give me a lot of ideas. They just kind of let me shoot. Sometimes I got to go back and do an extra shoot to kind of make sure I achieve what it is they're ultimately after, which is a bit of a discovery because it's the kind of session that evolves over time. Sometimes I hit it right out first shoot. Sometimes I have to go back and do some additional shots. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much, and have yourselves a great day.